It is a blessing to be here with you today. This is a bit of a homecoming for me. I was raised a fourth-generation Unitarian Universalist in upstate New York. I know, there aren't that many of us. But beyond that, my grandfather was a member of this very congregation in the 1920s during his studies, back when it was the little stone church downtown. But it's a bit like returning home for the first time from college or after you get married. It's familiar, but not really like your home used to be. As shortly after my own college experience, I found my spiritual home in Islam. Nonetheless, Unitarian Universalism is a childhood home that I loved and that I am grateful for, particularly the spiritual foundation that it gave me. The foundation comes in many ways, but at the core are the principles. And I understand values have been added now too, which are beautiful, and I'm glad that you all haven't abandoned examining semantics carefully in my absence. I will say we had a little bit of confusion around the first service, and so in some places I may accidentally slip up and call them values, but please hear principles in your head. They're all beautiful. For those of you who are guests, they've got a wonderful brochure right here. There's even a great acronym that goes, of course, with the values, and they're all beautiful and wonderful. So Reverend Minesh had asked me originally to speak about Islam when he invited me. But lately, I have been thinking a lot about what y'all have to offer the world, and particularly the growing population of nuns with these valuables and these principles. Despite my best effort, God can be a little bit of a hard sell to the atheist on the street corner, and particularly if it's a corner in Ann Arbor. But as a chaplain, I believe that people benefit from spiritual practices and spiritual community, even broadly defined. And engaging with the UU values as a spiritual practice, offers what I think might be an appealing vessel for many. And unlike some of the religious values that are being touted in the world right now, yours are pretty hard to manipulate. So allow me to make a pitch. Yes, we can. In particular, I have been thinking about the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and its relationship to the sixth. That, if you need a reminder, is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. I believe that the first is critical to achieving the sixth and urgently essential in this moment we are living in. Now, as a Muslim, I believe that we have been endowed by God with worth and dignity simply by being created, but additionally, that we've been created with uniqueness, which we are called upon to use as the appointed caretakers of the world. It can be hard to see these blessings in a capitalist culture that is constantly telling us that we don't have enough, and therefore we fundamentally aren't enough. Like taco, it's enough to make us all fall apart. I have a personal spiritual practice to mitigate this that I learned through the Alternatives to Violence project. Let me say, after that taco story, I was like, I'm just gonna pack up and go home. Y'all don't need me, like you got this. But I wanna share this with you. The Alternatives to Violence project is a movement that was developed by civil rights and anti-Vietnam war activists during the 1970s, many of whom were incarcerated during its inception. AVP recognizes that violence is born out of unhealed wounds, and that the ability to affirm self and others is a tool for healing the wounds and transforming power in positive ways. I could tell you about it, but I think it would be more meaningful for you to actually experience it. I also realized that coffee hour is after, and yesterday was a busy day for many of those working to salvage our democracy. So if you're feeling a little bit introverted and you're not quite ready to engage in this activity with a partner, we have paper and pencils. I'm gonna give to Reverend Minesh. The people are welcome to get. But hold up, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. For those of you who are on on live stream, you can use the chat feature for a group conversation. But for those of you who are in the room, and are up for some affirming connection, I'm going to ask you to find a partner, somebody close by for the sake of time, quickly and quietly. Make eye contact, give a thumbs up, nod. If you're introverted and you're like, no, I don't want one, it's okay. You can tell them no. All right, I see. We've got one up here who needs a partner. All right. Anyone else? Everybody got one who wants one? Okay, so here's, don't get too far ahead of me yet. Hang on. All you got to do right now is find someone. Okay, so here's the practice. With your partner, are we good? Awesome. All right. With your partner, one of you is going to speak for 2 minutes, naming affirmation of yourself. And the other is going to practice showing the speaker how much they matter to you, just like our song said, with your whole self, but not using any words. I'll give you a time check, and then we'll swap partners. If somebody, like Taco, is struggling, it's okay. Sometimes people need a little silence to begin to be able to find the light in the darkness. So just hold that space for them. Okay, introverts, you're gonna now need to decide if 4 minutes of self-affirmation feels scarier than 2 with a partner. And if you wanna swap, now's your chance. I hear there might be somebody up here needing somebody. Okay, virtual folks, you're gonna use the first 2 minutes to type without sending. And then when I call time swap, you can all push send and take the next 2 minutes to read. Okay, we got it? Anyone need paper? Good? Okay. So before we begin, I want to say that an affirmation is a concrete, specific statement about strengths, gifts, and positive characteristics. There are no caveats, no buts in this activity. None of us are perfect. We are all a work in progress, but today we are just going to practice affirmation. Okay? So go ahead and decide who's going to start first. All right. So one is speaking and one is listening. Go ahead and begin. Affirmation. We're going to go ahead and begin to wrap up those thoughts. Almost. Not. Okay. Go ahead and wrap up your thoughts and thank your partner. Oh, there's so much goodness. I'm going to pull us back together, and I'm going to ask, we're going to go ahead and swap partners. It's a practice. You can come back to it later. You should. Coffee hour is a great place for this, but go ahead and swap partners. ask you to begin wrapping up your thought. As you wrap up your thought, thank your partner. Thank your partner for sharing, and thank your partner for listening. Wow. Can you feel that goodness in the air? Oh, soak it up. Soak it up. Feel your body for a moment. I hope that you feel a little bit lighter. I also want to acknowledge that for some people, this is a really difficult activity. There's so much brokenness in this culture that we live in. Those wounds run deep. But I invite you to keep practicing. Like a taco, may you find those affirmations for yourself. Usually in the workshops, we then form quads, and partners introduce their partner with their affirmations to the new pair so that you get to reprocess how you are hearing things. So during coffee hour, I will give you that, because there are a few other things I'm going to try to fit in this morning. The movements that are going to get us to achieving the peace are going to need a lot. And friends, you need to be able to name and affirm what you have to offer, regardless of where you believe these come from. We need introverts and extroverts, artists and speakers, tech support, good food and hugs, both physical and metaphorical, joy and rituals to sustain us, and so much more. You are enough, and you are an important piece of this puzzle. This is a spiritual practice. There is not room for arrogance in this. Arrogance is born out of brokenness. It is a maladaptive response when one chooses to run from the pain that healing would require them to walk through. So what does it mean to practice honoring the worth and dignity of everyone and to love in this moment? And why do I think it's so important for you to share? Well, first, let me say that without it, I don't believe we can salvage our democracy, let alone manifest the goal of world peace. It's fundamentally a strategic decision. For me, I've got to do it if I want to improve my chances of getting to paradise. But the right thing to do aside, I think it's also a winning strategy, even for those of you who believe that you cease to exist after death. Pointing fingers doesn't usually do much good, but the adage about when you point at someone else, there's always 3 fingers pointing back at you, bears lifting up. You all know this, right? You point, you get 3 fingers coming back at. Now, excuse me for stereotyping, and I understand we have some guests from the University of Michigan today, so I won't put you in this bucket, but I'm going to assume, unless there's been a radical change since I left the church, that most of you fit in the left bucket. Okay? Now, not everybody in the left bucket is guilty, but surely many of us, myself included, bear some responsibility for engaging in or simply allowing the dignity and worth to be decentered over the past few years. Take, for example, some of the jokes that come at the expense of our fellow Americans on the right. The cost of that expense is what we have to grapple with now, and it turns out it's not cheap. Hurt people will hurt other people. In my house, we don't talk about bad guys. My husband works in the prison, and I have got a very gender-typical 7-year-old boy, so there's a lot of societal pressure to frame things around the good guys and the bad guys. But my husband is also a chaplain, so we practice talking about people who did bad things. And because we believe through our God-centered framework in the worth and dignity of every person, we believe that healing is enabled by love and that a return to goodness can be facilitated. Now, I want to be clear. This offering of love and the honoring of worth and dignity doesn't turn a blind eye to injustice. It does not leave the vulnerable unprotected. And this is where community is so important. Sikh peace activist Valerie Kerr writes in her book, See No Strangers, which I cannot strongly enough recommend. How many of you have read this? Oh, people, please. I'm going to return it to the library this afternoon and go get it. She writes in this book, See No Stranger, loving our opponents is hard. Revolutionary love is not about making martyrs of ourselves. Tending wounds is the practice of a community, not the sacrifice of an individual. Sometimes allies need to be the ones doing the heavy lifting. Gender-normative straight white people with a healthy sense of their own worth and dignity, free of arrogance, have one of the most important roles to play. You can go to places and talk to people in ways that so many others cannot. Part of that is because when people are afraid, they lose their capacity for empathy. And I had to cut out my whole micro lesson on brain science, which I'm sure as a bunch of Unitarian Universalists you probably would have really enjoyed. But for the sake of time, it bears repeating. When people are afraid, the capacity for empathy is compromised. It doesn't matter, as it turns out, if that fear is manufactured by external forces or internally by our own anxiety coming out of our unhealed wounds. But the body feels it as real and shuts down the neural pathway for empathy. Allies have a larger window to leverage, and connection infused with love can heal in miraculous ways. And I'm sorry that I neglected to screenshot this so that I could cite it, but some wise person on Facebook recently wrote about the importance of receiving former MAGA members, Make America Great members, with a casserole and love, instead of I told you so's. This is a person with a well-polished heart who understands inherent worth and dignity and strategy. So how do we stop ourselves and others from living in this place of fear? Many different approaches to navigating conflict begin with two things we practiced earlier: connection and affirmation. Also in this book, Valerie shares a personal practice to facilitate this. Out in the world, she writes, I notice the unconscious biases that arise in me when I look at the faces on the street or in the news. To practice seeing each of them as a sister or a brother or a family member, I say in my mind, you are a part of me I do not yet know. And she proceeds with wonder. This resonates with an Islamic teaching to see humanity as one being. When a member of that being is unwell, we are collectively unwell. To heal the collective being, we must tend to the wounds of the other and tend to the wounds of ourselves. Which brings me to the next reason why I believe it is so important to center worth and dignity of all people in this moment that we are living in. It is a spiritual practice that will sustain us through this heavy lifting. Hatred, even in its most mundane forms, will poison our hearts and limit our individual and our collective capacity, whereas love will lift us up. In Islam, we speak about the veils that can separate our spiritual heart from Allah. Known as the diseases of the heart, these prevent us from convening fully with God and from reflecting God's love and light into the world. One of these veils is enmity towards another person or a group of people. So when we hold enmity in our heart, it does us and the movement injustice by withholding God's light and preventing us from fully reflecting it. We must constantly engage in the process of purifying our hearts. And I know in some spaces, in some UU spaces, and the street corners in Ann Arbor, the language of God doesn't always resonate with everyone. So I simply invite you to ask how carrying hatred, even small amounts, in your heart feels for your body. Mahmoud Khalil, the pro-Palestinian peace advocate from Colombia, who is currently held in a detention center in Louisiana, days away from what will be, inshallah, the birth of his first child, recently wrote a powerful letter. And in it, he said, I have always believed that my duty is not only to liberate myself from the oppressor, but also to liberate my oppressors from their hatred and fear. Imagine what it would be like to live in the world when we have accomplished this. We would have reached that beautiful sixth principle. For me, personally, the centering of worth and dignity manifests in many ways. Thanks to all of the fair trade hot chocolate I consumed as a good Unitarian Universalist church kid, I try to make sure that my shopping supports businesses and production processes that center worth and dignity when I have to buy stuff. Whenever possible, I opt for gifting and mutual aid economies. I don't just allow myself joy, I seek it out. And I make time for joy and time for grief healing when they're needed. And this today is where I want to invite you to join me. I hope you're all doing those things. Many UUs are. This one's a little bit harder. I have made a personal commitment to not take cheap shots at those I disagree with. Those memes about politicians, the comedic approach to putting down the other side, the flippant choice to engage through nastiness centered on a person rather than a proper critique of the idea. I'm practicing leaving all of those behind. I won't be buying a Tesla. It's way out of my price range. But I'd also like to send a message. I also won't inflict damage on the ones that others have. Now, I imagine that probably none of you are out inflicting damage on the Teslas, but maybe. But, on a much more basic level, there were some really funny on the surface signs out there at those beautiful protests yesterday. But I believe that this style of nastiness, which is as pervasive on the left as it is on the right, got us into this pickle. And that the pathway out will disappear into the shadows unless we commit to centering the worth and dignity of every person, and we let those principles light the way. If you will allow me an adaptation of John 14 from the Bible, I believe honoring the inherent worth and dignity is the way movements for peace and justice need to center. That their existence is the truth we must lift up, that our lives will be enriched by doing so, and that no one will come to true peace except through this. So on the street corner, I'm going to keep working on the call to Islam, but please lift up the blessings that you beautiful Unitarian Universalists have to offer. Let the principles guide and encourage your engagement, center worth and dignity. Know that you have something magnificent that the world is literally starving for, and share it generously. Basically, I'm begging you to go out and proselytize. And for those of you who can take it safely to rural America, please do so. The rest of us need your help, and we'll keep doing the work on the home front.